And welcome back. How's everyone getting on?
Doing very good. Today we're joined by Sloan Tomlinson. Sloan, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi. I am Sloan Tomlinson. I live in Massachusetts and the United States, and I work with wasps in addition to many other things. I currently am also working at a nonprofit educational outreach program, which specializes in teaching people about insects, their importance, how great they are, valuable lessons to be learned from them, how important they are to our environment. And we go and do programs throughout museums and science centers, schools, etc. And I work a lot with researching the parasitoid wasps that come out of caterpillars at that lab. And I do a lot of other things like photography and fine art printing, and yeah.
A jack of all trades, but the
Yeah.
one that really caught my interest and made me want to have this conversation today was the wasps, because I don't know how many experts there are out there on wasps specifically, because it's obviously very niche, and
Yeah.
they're pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about parasitoid wasps, and the Alien movie was based off one that well, it lays its eggs inside of caterpillars, and then
Yeah.
like
Comes out of their
yeah,
pocket. Yeah.
yeah, that's weird. Like that nature is metal.
Yeah,
That's
no, it's you basically you can take any of the most intense science fiction movies you've ever seen, and then you go into the insect world, and there's even more crazy, insane stuff
mm,
that's happening in real life right around you. We get a lot of very interesting behavior with the parasitoid wasp at the lab. There are species that you turn their host into zombies. So that's a pretty intense thing. The
mm,
wasp larvae, the female wasp lays her egg inside of the caterpillar. The larvae eat the insides of the caterpillar, but they don't kill it. But they eat most of its hemolymph, which is insect blood, they eat its fats, and then they break through its skin and they spin their cocoons beneath its body. That triggers a response thanks to poly-DNA viruses that the female wasp injected in with her eggs. That causes the caterpillar to become the bodyguard. So it will actually become a zombie. It will never leave the cocoon side. So it will just sit on top of the wasp cocoons and guard them from predators.
mm.
And then it will die. So it will never go on again to do anything else like that. So it's yeah, there's some pretty intense, bizarre life cycles that happen with parasitoid wasps, which have definitely inspired a lot of science fiction because, I mean, it's happening right under our noses, and some very, very bizarre life cycles.
That's super fucked up.
Absolutely, they're weird.
That's super fucked up. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, and then that's not the whole thing. Like there's so many species out there, and they're discovering them all the time. And
Yeah,
we were talking earlier before we started about one so tiny that rather than have like traditional wings, it's so
right.
small it has wings more like paddles to swim
Yep,
through the air.
yep.
I
So
guess when
those are
you're that small, the air is more
yep.
I don't know,
The
dense.
air is denser than the insect is, so they actually can't physically fly, but they do have wings. So the smallest known flying insect is a wasp. It's a parasitoid wasp that is an egg parasitoid. So it lays its eggs into eggs of other insects. So you imagine an insect, its eggs are super tiny. So these wasps are the size of an egg, or actually sometimes many of them fit into one egg. That's how small they are. Those are fairy flies, are their common names. Maimardi is the family name, and they are a pretty broad group of wasps. We don't know a lot about them because so many of them are so small, and some of them are still being discovered constantly that are even smaller. Like they think they find the smallest one, and then they find one that's even smaller. There are really bizarre life cycles with them too, because a lot of them will actually, the female will lay multiple eggs inside of the host egg. They'll larvae will hatch, they'll eat the whole inside of their host's egg. They'll pupate inside of the egg. The males will actually close first, a close being like coming out of their pupa. And the males have no eyes and they have no wings. And they basically then mate with their sisters and then die inside the egg. And then the females chew their way out and they fly off and start the process over again.
Mm. Man, that's a weird life cycle. I'm glad we got our one, not their one. It's kind of crazy. And do you ever think to yourself sometimes, like, what is going on here? Like this is very bizarre in comparison to how like mammals or vertebrates live their lives.
There's definitely, I mean, it's pretty intense and completely unusual life cycles. I mean, I think most people who don't work with insects are pretty surprised about how bizarre these life cycles are. Insects are the most dominant force of life on Earth. There's about 1 million described species of insects on the planet. There's easily 5 times that many we haven't discovered yet. And you compare that to all the species of vertebrates, so fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, all of those combined isn't even like a tenth of that. So insects they're everywhere. And so wasps are actually probably one of the largest groups of insects. It's kind of this constant battle between entomologists as to which group is the largest. So the people who study beetles say beetles are. People who study flies say flies are. People who study wasps say wasps are.
Yeah.
A lot of new science that wasps are probably most likely the largest group of insects on Earth. We just don't know about a lot of them because they're very, very small and have very like specialized life cycles. So yeah. Some of the behavior is very, very, very weird.
Yeah, very, very bizarre. And there's very few things in nature that cause this kind of zombie-like behavior. There's cordyceps, the fungi that makes ants climb up and fucking big stalk of cordyceps comes out of their head. That's pretty weird. But burrowing inside or putting your eggs inside of a cockroach and tricking it to take care of them before they eat it. Whoa!
Isn't there a bird that does that? Like they lay their eggs in another one's in another one's nest.
No, it's different. There's a difference between laying it inside its nest and inside of it.
Oh yeah, well, like of course, yeah. But I'm saying like then the other bird think it's their egg and they look after it until they hatch and they kill it. Right? What bird am I thinking of?
I know you're thinking of part of it. It kills the other ones in the nest, so it gets all the food.
Yeah.
Or it'll bully them to get all the food.
Cuckoo birds, yeah, that's it.
That's
yeah.
There's actually a group of wasps. The chrysidid wasps are actually called cuckoo wasps. And the reason why they're called that is because they go into the nests of other wasps or bees and they lay their eggs inside of those nests. But unlike the cuckoo bird, these wasps don't get raised by the host wasp or bee. They actually just kill all their babies and eat them.
Yeah, that's yeah, as I said, nature, metal. And then funny you bring up bees because like technically like they're kind of wasp. Like when people think wasp, you're thinking like yellow jackets and maybe hornets. You're rarely ever thinking of like all these other things. And you'd be surprised what's like within the same family. It includes ants and bees. But yeah, it's a big family. And we always see like the bees as being the good ones and wasps as being anything annoying. And with you dealing with parasitoid wasps, that must be a fairly common thread of them being pretty damn evil.
Well, evil is how you look at it, I suppose. Certainly not Disney-esque in their life.
Yeah.
But it's parasitoidism is a pretty it's probably the most dominant sort of life cycle for a lot of insects because it's a pretty successful life cycle. I mean, you lay your eggs inside of another insect, then you don't have to worry about your legs getting eaten because they're inside something else, and you have a ready supply of food. It's a gruesome life cycle, but it's definitely a very important part of it. Parasitoids take care of a lot of pest insects. And without them, the huge populations would explode in caterpillars. They defoliate things. You lose a lot of plants because the caterpillars' populations would explode. Parasitoid wasps are used a lot in agriculture in ways of trying to use less pesticides. So there are wasps that are specialized to only lay their eggs in the eggs of pest insects. like stink bugs and caterpillars and other things that are flies, that would be damaging crops. So you, instead of putting down pesticides, you release a ton of these wasps, and the wasps actually take care of the pests for you. But yeah, it is interesting that, most people think bees are good, wasps are evil. That's a pretty common thread amongst a lot of people. It's that you see memes about it all the time online.
Yeah.
Good guy bee, wasps are the devil, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But generally, it's because people only think of wasps, they only think of the social wasps. So they think of yellow jackets, they think of hornets, they think of paper wasps. They think about the wasps that they've probably gotten stung by at one point in their life. But social wasps only make up a really, really tiny proportion of overall wasp species. So maybe a few hundred species of social wasps on the planet versus hundreds of thousands of parasitoid wasps. So most wasps are solitary, and most of them actually can't even sting. So they're pretty harmless.
But there's one out there with a god awful sting. I don't know if anyone who's watching or listening right now ever seen that series Coyote Peterson did. It's kind of what brought him his fame. He was stung by some of the most painful stings in nature. What was it? What was the one that got him? The tarantula hawk.
Yeah.
And that's an awful one to look at because Thomas, can you pull that one up?
Yeah, I can.
You, get a picture of a stinger.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty intense stinger. The tarantula hawks are definitely a really quite a cool wasp. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the thumbnail from his video there. Third picture in.
Yeah,
they're called tarantula wasps. Wasps. Or no, yeah, tarantula wasps because tarantula hawk. I'm gonna trip over myself because they kill tarantulas. Boom.
The females hunt tarantulas, and there's some pictures there of the females wrestling with the tarantulas, but they can take down a tarantula 4 or 5 times their size, and the females will basically force the tarantula to get into its defensive posture, which is, lifting its front legs up. If you've ever held a tarantula or been around a tarantula and they get upset, fangs go up, front legs go up. That's the defensive posture. But the wasp wants it to do that because as soon as it does that, the female then uses that very long stinger, which she actually positions her abdomen underneath her body, stings the tarantula in the middle of its thorax, right where its legs connect. That paralyzes the front legs. It also paralyzes the fangs. Tarantula goes down. It's difficult to move. The wasp, she climbs onto its back, and then she stings directly into its brain, which shuts its whole body down, but doesn't kill it.
That is so awful. Paralyzed, stabbed in the brain.
Yeah, stabbed in the brain. But it's paralyzed to the point of, the deepest possible coma. Like the tarantula at that point is basically dead. The only things that are functioning are its heart and some other little slight vital organ activity to just keep it just alive long enough. And the reason why she does that is because after she's done that, she drags it to a burrow, she lays her eggs on it, she closes the burrow off, and that's her done. She's not mothering again. So the larvae will hatch, but if the spider was dead, it would be dried out, it would rot before the larvae had hatched. This way the larvae hatch, they're able to eat a fresh spider, and they actually eat it in such a way that they keep the vital organs for last so that it stays alive as long as possible.
That is rough. That is probably one of the worst ways you could possibly go.
Yeah.
And the sting, I assume is it a numbing kind of thing? Because it paralyzes the...
Yeah, they probably have such a very powerful sting because they're actually having to take down a tarantula, which which itself has venom. So a lot of times they actually lose the battle. The tarantula will kill the wasp, but the sting is probably so venomous, and the venom is so potent because they have to try to take down this very large venomous animal as quickly as possible. There's an entomologist named Justin O. Schmidt who did a pain scale. It was the 1 through 5, sort of like how painful a thing is. And he actually did all this, he stung himself with ants and bees and wasps long before Coyote Peterson came around. And he did this research, and basically the tarantula hawk and then an ant called the bullet ant are supposed to be the two most painful stings on the planet. And they kind of tie each other. But supposedly he says it's like basically like getting shot. You know, it's literally kind of the worst pain you could possibly imagine, and it lasts for hours. But I will also say, with solitary wasps like the tarantula hawk, getting stung is pretty unlikely. You know, if you watch those videos of Coyote Peterson and he's getting stung by various solitary wasps, he's really kind of having to force the wasp to do it.
Yeah.
They don't really want to waste their time with a human or even stinging anything except a tarantula. So they'll sting, of course, to defend themselves. You know, if you pick one up and start playing with it, she's going to sting you. But, you know, they're not going to ever go after you. They don't have a nest to protect. They don't have sisters to back them up like a social wasp nest. So, you know, you leave them alone, they're not going to bother you. You could probably go and touch one, and she's not going to bother you. She'll probably just fly away.
I'm glad.
I'll pass.
That helps me sleep.
No, I'll still pass on touching it though. You'd have to be out of your mind, or you know, Coyote Peterson to do that.
One or the other. Yeah. And it's amazing how like social behavior is evolved in, you know, insects and in vertebrates. Yeah, you don't really see it on like lower structures. Like you're not going to see much of it in, or like complex behavior in like amphibians or even some reptiles. But then when you start scaling it up, you know, there's like obviously human society, there's chimpanzee society, gorillas, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to these insects, and they really work like a hive mind. It's just amazing how, you know, I don't know what you call it, when two things evolve similarly, separately. Yeah, no, it's cool to see.
Yeah,
and it's huge in that family.
Yeah, the social structures that happen in wasps and bees, of course, and ants are pretty interesting. There's definitely, it's been studied a lot, you know, I mean, especially with bees because of their importance to agriculture. But you know, wasps have been proven to be very intelligent. Social wasps can recognize each other by their face. Some recent studies have shown that, which is pretty amazing. So this tiny little insect is able to, you know, see another wasp of its same species, and it's able to recognize whether it's a member of its nest or if it's a member of a different nest, simply by looking at its face, just like we humans would look at somebody and say, oh, I know that person, or I don't know that person.
Yeah.
That's facial recognition in an insect is pretty phenomenal. So social wasps are definitely very intelligent creatures in a lot of ways, because all social animals have to be somewhat intelligent. You know, it's difficult to be a social creature and not have some sort of complex brain waves, because otherwise your social structure would fall apart. You know, social wasps are something I don't do as much with. They get the lion's share of people's appreciation, excuse me. But I would say, you know, they're still really something I like all wasps really, and I study them all kind of equally. You know, that behind me this is.
Ooh, show and tell.
This is a bald-faced nest. So you know, in Ireland, you have a similar species. I think in Ireland it's Dolichovispula media, the median wasp. And in America, we have these that are called bald-faced hornets in America, but they're not actually hornets. It's one of those names that they have. It's not actually accurate. They're actually more like a yellow jacket. They're pretty big black and white wasps, but I think what's pretty amazing about this is, like, you know, this was all made in 1 year, and it's a one-time use thing. So they make it from starting in spring until fall, and then it's done. So this is, you know, bigger than my head is, and they can get twice as big as this, which is pretty amazing. And
I've had the experience opening up the shed after a long winter of finding the nest.
And definitely not something you want to find when they're active.
They were.
Yeah. Social wasps definitely can be very protective of their nests. And I mean, one of the reasons why they can is because, just like with bees, you know, they're so protective because workers don't matter. the workers die in the process of protecting their nest, the nest is still going to function because the queen's still in there. There's still more workers. There's larvae to protect and pupae to protect and egg to protect. So, if you have a nest that size, that nest could have had like 500 wasps in it. Even if 100 of them died in the process of protecting their nest, if they did protect the nest would still function. Whereas if you have a solitary wasp, like a tarantula hawk, she doesn't have any sisters to back her up. She doesn't have a nest to protect. So if she risks stinging you and then gets killed in the process, her whole larvae will never survive. She won't have food to provide for them. So social wasps are definitely a little bit more aggressive than solitary wasps. Definitely not something you want to run into by accident.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, just that kind of like structure they have of being a social group. You don't really see that in like other groups of insects. Like you wouldn't see that in flies or beetles at all.
No,
not as far as I've ever seen, but it's super common in the wasp family.
Well, it's wasps, bees, and ants are definitely the most dominant sort of examples of. It's called the fancy term is eusociality. So it's a caste system of social caste system. So you have different insects that are in the nest that have different roles. That's very common in ants, where you have like some that are workers, some that are soldiers, some that are nursemates. But yeah, you don't see it as much in other insects. There's not really any very complex structures, except for, of course, termites, which are technically a kind of cockroach. So termites are basically social cockroaches.
I would have thought they were in the ant family. That's what I thought.
The common misconception about them is because they have a very similar structure. They have the flying reproductive stage where all the flying ones fly around. They're everywhere. They can get into your homes. They have underground nests. They have a very similar life cycle to ants. But the major difference is that with termites, all the workers are either male or female. With ants, bees, and wasps, all of the workers are female. Male wasps, bees, and ants play no roles in the nest whatsoever. Male wasps and bees and ants cannot sting, only the females can. So males are only pretty much around for one purpose, which I'm pretty sure you can imagine what that purpose is. But usually the nests are, with a large nest, social wasp nests, you won't actually have males until the end of the year. So the females, the workers, just, they tend to the nest, do everything. Males are born at the end of the year. They leave the nest, they find a new queen to mate with, and then they die. So they don't really have much of a purpose, particularly. Whereas with termites, it's both male and females that are workers.
Yeah. Well, I guess some would consider that a sound old life, and some would consider it fairly sad. Yeah, I did know that genuinely, but yeah, honestly, I don't know what to say to that. Sloan, how did you even get into this? Because this is obviously a very niche subject, but I guess someone has to do it.
Well, I mean, there's entomology is something I've always been interested in since I was a little kid. I was always interested in insects from a very early age, and it just sort of stuck around. I didn't end up ever going to school for it. I actually consider myself an autodidactic entomologist. So like I taught myself everything that I know. Oh, wow. I, have people that I'm connected with through social media that are professional entomologists working in academia that I can communicate with, get papers from, things like that. But I never went to school for it. And actually, if I kind of had given up on the idea of ever working in the field until I found the job at the lab up in New Hampshire, which was actually a really great sort of thing for me. But yeah, it's been something sort of a lifelong love, but it was basically art and entomology were the two things that I was obsessed with as a kid. And art was the thing that I went to school for instead of entomology. In the United States, there's not a lot of jobs for entomologists. We don't fund them in this country very much. Most of the research is being done in Europe or in Asia as far as insects go. And that's just because in the United States, pretty much the only thing that we want to do with bugs here is kill them. So people get degrees, PhDs even in entomology, and pretty much the only jobs available are working in pest control companies and developing new ways of killing them, developing new ways of controlling them. And that just wasn't something I was interested in doing. So
Well, I'm
That's fair.
glad you found a way to put, art and your love of wasps together, because you do that on Instagram now. You own a
yeah,
photography account for wasps. That's awesome.
yeah. I mean, that was kind of my blending of my two things, my photography love and then my insect love with these things. And that's what I did during COVID in last year, was I just started taking these photos in that way. And that's what the Instagram account, all those photos were taken this last summer. Because, at the lab, normally during the summer from basically May through September, we're doing programs, at schools, museums, at nature centers, blah, 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 et cetera, all summer long. But last year, obviously, we didn't do any of those. We didn't have any programs because they were all canceled because of COVID. So I had a lot more time on my hands. So I went out in the back fields behind my house and drove around to woods and meadows and whatnot, and just caught wasps and brought them back here and took photos of them and started working on them. Well, ideally, I'd like to try working on a book is what my goal is with them.
Why book?
Why a book? Just because I really want to create a book that sort of showcases how amazing wasps are and how unbelievably diverse they are.
Mm.
So it kind of not necessarily geared towards the experts, but geared towards more of the lay people, more of the people who don't know as much, but are maybe interested in learning about insects, because wasps get a very, very bad rap. It's been, I oftentimes, when I tell people who aren't in my entomology world what I'm interested in, and they say, why wasps? Like, ew, gross. They're awful. I hate them. They're assholes. They sting me. So I want to try to create something that is a published thing that basically, showcases how great these things are, and how amazing they are, and how, utterly complex they are. It's not just yellow jackets and hornets. That's just like barely even an icing on the cake as far as how many
Mm.
species there are, and what kind of diversity there is. And they're also how vital of a role that they play in the ecosystem. Even the social wasps that people don't like are important predators. They're also pollinators. Adult wasps are incapable of eating solid foods, which is something a lot of people don't know. So an adult wasp doesn't eat solid foods. They eat nectar or sap, anything sugary, just like a bee does. And so a lot of wasps are important pollinators. And so some of them even more so than bees. There are some plants that only rely on wasps to be pollinate them. Figs, for example, are only pollinated by wasps. And they also are parasitoids, and the other predators do help to control populations of insects, just like any predator would do. So they're a vital, important part of the ecosystem, and I think they need to get a little bit more love than they do, which is also why I started the Instagram account, because I wanted to showcase these photos of like these portraits, basically, of wasps,
Mm.
just because of how beautiful they are, really.
Yeah, and that's how we ended up getting in contact to do this. Occasionally, I want to take a step away from having actors on or comedians, blah, blah, blah. I like people who are more expert in their fields, and I just kind of went scrolling through. I was like, okay, huh, wasps.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about wasps. What else is there? And then obviously message you, and here we are today. We've done the same with a guy who was a dart frog breeder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was cool.
that was pretty cool.
Shout out
That,
to you, Chuck.
that
You
sounds
mean
pretty
Jack?
cool. I don't breed any wasps, although actually I do have a paper wasp nest that's I have paper wasps that are hibernating in my garage right now.
On purpose?
So yeah, no, I reared them last year. I actually spoke to a friend of mine a Facebook friend of mine who is in Italy, who raises paper wasps. Paper wasps are actually pretty easy to raise. They don't make particularly large nests like yellow jackets or hornets do. And basically all you need to do is just supply them with some cardboard to chew up to make their nests. honey or sugar water to feed the adults, and then toss in caterpillars every once in a while for them to feed their larvae. And so I actually had them. I had a female last year, and she had a nest, and she raised offspring. And then I got males for the offspring. They mated, and now they're overwintering. And gonna bring them out in spring and see if they'll start a new nest.
In nature, what do they eat? Because there's obviously a lot like scraps of paper just floating around the place.
Wood, usually wood, dried wood, or like reeds, anything that's kind of fibrous like that. They'll use that to make their nests. A lot of times human structures are easy to come by. So, you know, if people have decks or they have fences, you'll oftentimes see wasps sitting on there, and they'll be chewing off the wood pulp and then mixing it with their saliva. And then they go back to the nest and make the nest. In the captive situation, the cardboard seems to work better for them. They're more readily apt to go after it, because in the wild, they tend to be very picky about where they're getting it from. So they only go to, like, you know, I actually have a pole in my garden, and every year the paper wasps will only go to that pole, but not to the other pole that's the exact same kind of wood. So, you know, who knows why, but there's something about that wood that's just right. It could be just, you know, how dry it is, or maybe like it's lacking in bacteria or fungus. Who knows? But they tend to be a little bit more picky in the wild. But yeah, just dried up wood. That's the major thing that they make them out of. And then, yeah, so social wasps, the queens overwinter. All the rest of the colony dies, so everybody else is dead.
What does that mean, overwinter?
They just like you know, bears. They hibernate. They find a place to hunker down, someplace dry, out of the way, and they just spend winter like that. They shut their bodies down completely, and then once the weather starts getting warm again, they wake back up. They get themselves some food, and then they find a spot to start building their nest. They'll have mated in the fall, so all the females, the queens, will have mated in the fall, so they already have, you know, everything they need to start a nest. And then they just start it all on their own. And then when the first workers are born and become adults, the queens tend to like not leave the nest after that, and then they're just mostly laying eggs. And then the workers take over, and then it starts the whole process over again. So by the end of summer, males and new queens emerge. All the workers die, the old queen dies, the males die after mating, and the new queens are the ones that overwinter and start the process over again.
And if a queen was to die in a nest, how would they go about, you know, getting a new queen? Or how do new queens like appear in the first place?
Well, new queens are so with social insects, social hymenopterans like wasps, bees, and ants. The queens are usually just female larvae that are fed a larger amount of food, a larger share of the food, basically, which allows them to develop into a larger and also actually able to mate fertile version of the workers, basically. And so that can happen, that usually happens towards the end of the season. But if a queen were to die in the middle of a season, they would never have a new one. Unlikely that they would ever have a new one, unless the workers somehow decided to feed another one more food. You do see that with honeybees, but that's because honeybees have enormous colonies. You know, a single honeybee colony can have 20 to 60,000 members. So when they have new queens, they do have them on a more regular basis. So if a queen dies, they can basically go, okay, well, here's some female larvae. We're gonna make that into a queen. Interestingly, in some social wasps, the workers will kill their queen. And that's because they want to lay eggs themselves. And so here's a weird thing. That's a crazy fact for you. So in hymenopterans, so in wasps, bees, and ants, female eggs come from fertilized eggs, and males come from unfertilized eggs. So a male wasp, bee, or ant doesn't have a father, but has a grandfather, which
That's cool. Shit.
which is a weird thing. So basically, the workers in a nest can lay male eggs, because the workers in, like, say that, bald-faced nest that showed you, the workers can't mate. They're incapable of mating. They don't have the biology to do it, but they can lay eggs, but they'll always be male because they haven't mated. Only the queen can make new workers because she's mated and can lay female eggs. So sometimes what will happen is towards the end of the season, the workers will kill their mother, who's the queen, so that they can lay their own male eggs, which will then pass on their genetic material to possibly mate with a new queen. And then, yeah, it's a very strange structure.
So it's not structured like perfectly, like they will kill.
Yeah. But they're passing on their own genetic material in some way. So it's, it's a weird thing that the males are only from unfertilized eggs. But it's kind of a way of, by doing that, they're passing on their genetic material to a new nest without being a queen themselves. So if you're a worker, you can't lay a female egg, you can't lay a queen egg, but you can lay a male egg who will mate with a queen, who will then start a new colony. So you'll have a whole colony that's technically yours versus your mother's. Weird things like that.
Yeah, definitely odd. And you really caught me off guard with they don't have fathers, but they have grandfathers. That's pretty weird.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, that's true across all the wasp, bees, and ants. So it's a weird genetic thing. It's not particularly true in other insect groups either. It's just something about the hymenopterans. I don't really particularly know why that's the case.
Well, evolution's a weird thing, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah, like some of the origins or believed origins of different species are very weird. Like they believe that like squids and octopus and whatever came from something that looked a lot like a limpet, and eventually it just knew how to like balance itself, was able to use its, I don't know, its stump to move, blah blah blah. And then, yeah, because we had a marine biologist on before. We had some weird conversations about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird stuff. My biology is so weird, but so interesting.
Yeah.
Like how life overcomes and then thrives in the weirdest environments. Like we were talking earlier about that tiny, tiny wasp and how it's adapted to fly when it's that small. But you say it doesn't really fly.
It swims through the air. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's so small and so less dense than the air is, it has to swim through the air. So it's like if you were their size, you literally would have to like be pushing the air out of your way to fly because the air was denser than you are. It's just a crazy thing to think about. But yeah, so it's very possible that there are thousands of species of these tiny wasps that we will never find because they're just so small.
It's just weird, man.
Yeah.
Just weird. So like, yeah, again, so much stuff I can do. Yeah. Well, there's only one terrestrial yoka that's able to live on Antarctica. I think it's a kind of wasp, is it?
There's a fly. There's a fly that lives in Antarctica. There's a fly
who lives. Fly.
Yeah, its larvae live in penguin shell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
If I try to look this up, it just doesn't work. Fly in Antarctica. Yeah, I'm not looking for a trip there.
I forget what it's called, but it's actually a very interesting species because so it's able to deal with the cold because the reason why things die in the cold is because the water inside of their cells freezes and the ice crystals rip open the cell. So this insect, which I don't remember what it's called, has the ability to actually remove water from all of its cells. So it basically dries itself out entirely, and then that way it can freeze completely solid and not die, as its cells are still intact. And then once it gets a little bit warmer during the the summer in Antarctica, it's able to rehydrate itself and then start the process over again. But yeah. Arctic
Thomas, can you put up a picture of
that? Yeah.
It's the Antarctic midge, or Belgica antarctica.
Yeah.
Or Belgica, whatever. Man, that's a weird thing. I heard about this thing when I was in transition year. Uh, I don't know how. Or maybe it was beforehand. I was doing this project on like terraforming Mars, and
Hmm.
we're looking like some like extremophile animals. And this one just came up in the research,
Yep, yep, that's the
like
one.
this and tardigrades, two ones I was interested in. But this
Tar-
yolk here, that's a cool yolk.
yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, the way that insects have adapted to virtually every sort of ecosystem is pretty amazing. It's the hottest deserts to the coldest climates. You have
Mm.
insects. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years, and they'll be a lot around hundreds of millions of years after we're gone, I'm sure. So they're a pretty complex group of animals, and the way that they've evolved to be able to deal with these extremes is pretty amazing. I don't know of any wasps that are in Antarctica. I don't
No,
think there are.
there's none native.
I think this is the only species of insect actually in Antarctica is this midge.
It's the
And
only
who knows
pure
what got?
terrestrial one because it doesn't fly.
Yeah, it's too cold, I'm sure, for it to fly. The wings to function.
Like
Wow.
the size of that thing. That's the biggest land animal on Antarctica.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Mad.
Yeah, extreme environments.
Yeah.
Um,
It's definitely drive things in a weird way for sure.
Absolutely. And you see that with tardigrades too. We just brought those up a second ago. Um, they've been exposed to the vacuum of space and freezing temperatures, extreme temperatures. They just chill. They're totally okay.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And
It's
then they're like super small or they vary in size.
yeah. The tardigrades are very different. They're definitely really, really, really cool creatures because of their ability to handle these extreme conditions. Probably shows us a lot about how life developed initially on Earth when it was an extreme planet. I mean, when there was extreme temperature swings and volcanic activity everywhere, and very likely that's how some of the early life probably looked. You know,
Hmm.
dealing with extremes, the extremophiles as they call them.
Yeah.
I don't know of any particular wasps that are specific to any kind of extreme environments, but they definitely are able to go beyond environments in very weird ways. Just to evolve in these unusual ways of dealing with finding their hosts or their prey. There's a recent video that came out in a lot of the entomology groups on Facebook that was this Japanese researchers caught. There's a species of braconid wasp who lays its eggs in aquatic caterpillars. So caterpillars, moths and butterflies evolved from caddisflies. It's a sister group to moths and butterflies. So they were aquatic at one point in their lives, many millions of years ago. And so there's a few caterpillar species that actually live underwater. And so there's this wasp that's lays its eggs in this underwater caterpillar. And in order to do that, it actually crawls around the top of the water and it envelops itself in air, an air bubble, and it swims down, finds the caterpillar, lays its egg on it, and then comes back up. The Japanese researchers actually called it the Godzilla wasp because it kind of bursts through the water every time like Godzilla does. But yeah, there's a few examples of like aquatic wasps, which is very
Mm.
weird. There's actually a species that lays its eggs on dragonfly eggs, and so these tiny tiny wasps live on the backs of female dragonflies. So they're called phoretic. They basically are not parasitic. They're not hurting the dragonfly. They're just staying on its body. And as soon as she enters her abdomen into the water and start laying her eggs, they crawl down her abdomen and into the water to lay their eggs into her eggs. So you have like these very, basically there's very few insects on the planet that don't have a parasitoid wasp that uses it at some point in its life cycle, either its egg or its larvae or its pupa or its adult.
Do
Um,
we?
Not us, no. There's no vertebrates that do it. No vertebrates. All vertebrates are safe from parasitoid wasps. It's just insects and arachnids. So there's some spiders that they go after. There's a species that goes after ticks even. So there's, but just arthropods. And as far as I know, only arachnids and insects.
Well, I guess we can consider ourselves lucky.
Yeah.
Uh, no, man, it's weird stuff. I love to learn about it. But yeah, like insects in general, they're a crazy group. And then like like false insects, like what are they called? Woodlice, and they're
Yep.
actually crustaceans.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a weird one. They
I
have
didn't even know that.
gills.
I didn't even
They
know
have
that.
gills, Thomas.
That's mad.
They do have gills. Yeah.
I never tried it, but like if you boil them, they turn red. So
I didn't know that. But yeah,
don't.
they're crustaceans. Yeah, yeah. That's on the ocean you have ones that are semi more like crustaceans. They're called, I think, slaters. And they look similar to the woodlice, but they actually live in sort of the tidal pools, going up and down into the water. Yeah, and then of course there are giant ones in the deep seas that are like the size of puppies.
I think there's one called. Is it sandfleas? Is that the same group, sandfleas?
Isopods.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay.
giant isopods in the deep sea are basically giant. They look like giant woodlice.
Yeah, man. I've said it so many times today. It's just weird. It's so weird how they evolved compared to us.
Well, I'd say arthropods were the dominant sort of life on Earth for a long time, and they still are. I mean, they make up about 90% of all animals on the planet are arthropods of some kind, either insects or arachnids or crustaceans, or myriapods like centipedes and millipedes. They've been around since before the dinosaurs existed, and they've evolved into so many different kinds of species and filling all kinds of different environmental niches. It's pretty amazing. And it's something that we need to take more consideration of as to how important they are to the biodiversity and to the ecosystems. There's a lot of new research coming out about how, we're losing insects at an alarming rate, and, figuring out a way to like stop that because, they are important. They're important to food for many birds. You lose insects, you lose birds. You lose birds, you lose trees, you lose all kinds of stuff. You lose insects, you lose plants.
It's dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
Like we were talking yesterday with Chris DeVault about regenerative agriculture, and he kind of has a system going, and even if pests get to something, he's so much plant diversity, something else is going to get to it, and like I guess in his system he's grown so much. Like if he didn't have the right wasp for these figs, it wouldn't work, or a bunch of other plants that he has like that. It's we kind of need to take care of them, and we could probably do it less spraying them. I think that the idea of just using I guess they're natural predators on pests is a better idea than straight up killing them.
Yeah.
Like the classic example of, I know it's not a wasp like, but using like a ladybug on aphids.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you'll have no more aphids.
Yeah, well, there's a wasp that does that too. There's always a wasp.
Always a goddamn wasp.
There's always a bigger fish.
There's actually a wasp that uses aphids, and it basically turns them into mummies. So they're called a mummy. They're called aphid mummy wasps. So they're a type
Thomas,
of.
can you pull it up?
Yeah. You can find little mummified aphids. They become little brown balls, basically. And so that's the same situation with the caterpillars. So you have a female wasp. She lays an egg inside of the aphid. Larva hatches, consumes the inside of the aphid. The aphid becomes a hard, crispy mummy, and then it pupates inside of the aphid's body and then chews its way out as an adult, starts to process over again. But they actually are used a lot in greenhouses because they're better than the ladybugs, because the ladybugs can damage other things in the. Yep, and they are.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah.
is that something crawling out of it in the fourth picture?
That looks like, that's one's crawling its way out. Yeah, you can see one of the other pictures there with the holes in them, that circular hole, sort of second one in.
Yeah, dude, that is awful to look at.
So wasps are wasps like circles a lot. So you'll oftentimes find that the wasp, when they chew their way out of a cocoon or they chew their way out of a host, it's a perfect circle. So that's a circle that the adult wasp made after it emerged from the aphid. But
So
yeah,
what do they lay their eggs inside of aphids?
yep. So that picture was down there showing the female like sticking her abdomen into the aphid. So they're pretty good at doing and getting rid of a lot of aphids. So there's a tropical greenhouse that raises butterflies up north of me, and they use those wasps because they can't really spray pesticides inside the tropical greenhouse because they raise tropical butterflies, which need the plants. So they have those wasps that take care of the aphids. They have wasps that take care of pest caterpillars like soybean loopers that they get a lot of in there. And they also have wasps that take care of thrips, which are little tiny, tiny, tiny insects that are really damaging to plants. So they use a lot of them in greenhouses and a lot of in agriculture too, which I think something, they're figuring out ways to use them to control invasive species too. Here in the United States, we have the spotted lanternfly that's sort of spreading from Pennsylvania to other states. It's an agricultural pest. It's really been hard to control, and it's from Asia, and it's just sort of taking over parts of orchards and vineyards and just destroying crops. And one of the solutions is actually introducing a wasp that will lay its eggs in their eggs. So wasps to the rescue.
Yeah, I say for organic gardeners, they're a godsend.
Yeah, for sure.
I say organic gardeners are probably the only people who appreciate wasps. For yourself.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that more gardeners, even just your average gardener, backyard gardener, a lot of times people don't want the wasps around because they think that they're not as important as the bees in their garden. But the wasps are really beneficial to your garden. I mean, they'll eat all the garden pests. They'll either eat them or parasitize them, and they'll also will help with the pollination. So having wasps around is definitely a good thing in your garden, not something to be afraid of.
Well, I might go out and buy some wasps then. It sounds like a good investment.
May as well, just to have them beside you, like,
Yeah, yeah. Put them in my room,
yeah.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Thumb on your shoulder,
With the amount of notes that Thomas has in that room, they'd make a big old nest. Oh, geez, it'd be bigger than the one you had there. But yeah, no, they're a crazy species. And you were saying earlier, like, we obviously haven't discovered all of them, which is kind of terrifying. Where's the other zombie ones?
Oh, who knows? There's probably been more bizarre life cycles we have yet to discover. I mean, that's true for insects in general. We don't know about a lot of them.
Because realistically, who wants to go and study the entire life cycle or keep track of the entire life cycle of one insect?
Yeah.
Like, more people are concerned about, I don't know, going off and doing engineering, maybe some kind of software thing. There's very few people, even in biology, that want to go and do this stuff because it's the hard work. It's not the fun work.
Yeah, and it's a shame, really. I mean, entomologists across the world, there's not as many of them as there are. People in animal biology want to study the popular kids. I like to call them, like dolphins and gorillas and chimpanzees. Lions and megafauna, animals that people can see really easily and study really easily. But very few people want to study insects, and I think that's probably because there's an overall stigma to them in general. Like even as little kids, people are like, ew, bugs are gross, or, I don't like bugs. That's a common sort of threat amongst children. So, if you're a little kid and you're interested in bugs and all of your peers are like, you're stupid for liking bugs. It's going to be difficult for these kids to grow up and study them, but we need more people studying them for sure.
Maybe with it coming more into light in terms of being like a food option, people might enter the field more because you see a lot of that. Maybe not exactly a wasp. I don't know if it's edible wasps. I know you can eat ants, but yeah, eating bugs is kind of becoming a thing now. It's been a thing in Asia for a while, in certain parts. Never so much in Europe, and definitely not in the United States. But yeah, it's starting to become a thing. So maybe that could get more people into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's as far as protein goes, it's certainly a lot cheaper and a lot easier, and also a lot better for the environment to raise grasshoppers and grind them up in a cow. I'm not sure I'd prefer a grasshopper burger over a cow burger.
Yeah, it'd be the same page. Have you ever tried insects?
I've had grasshoppers before, which were
What do you think?
they were very fried and lots of seasoning, so it just kind of tasted like crispy, fried, salty things. So it wasn't really, I don't know if I'd ever have one of the like, the grubs that are all full of stuff. I'm not sure I'd be interested in that.
Sitting there snacking away. Most people have like a little thing of peanuts, and you're sitting there eating your.
Yeah.
Ugh.
No, but it's in a lot of cultures. It's eating insects is normal in a lot of cultures across the
Yeah.
world.
Like just because like we don't like it doesn't mean it's wrong.
Exactly.
Let them at it. 100%.
Let me let this up a little bit. Yeah. What we got here? Okay, there's a lot of species that are edible, apparently.
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, really.
234 of butterflies and moths, 344 beetles, 313 ants, bees and wasps, or they're all in the same group, 313 ants, bees and wasps. 239 grasshoppers, crickets, cockroaches, 39 termites, 20 dragonflies. Interesting.
Mad.
Yeah, I've been told that certain kinds of ants end up tasting like pistachios, and if that's as bad as it gets, that sounds all right. But anyways, Sloan, I'm not going to have you sit here and talk about eating insects. It's been a pleasure having you on today.
Yes. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Obviously, we're not experts. Very obviously, I just general curiosity, and you're obviously very open about discussing what you do and so on. So, thank you very much. If people want to check you out, where can they find you?
I suppose you can find me through my Instagram, which is just at Sloan Tomlinson. You can also find more information about me and also the lab I work at. It's just thecaterpillarlab.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we definitely need help with people being interested in us. We've been around for 7 or 8 years though. So those are probably the easiest ways to find me. If you want to see more of my wasp photos, then certainly Instagram is probably the best place to go for that. I don't have any place else at the moment.
And they're cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So do you have any, last things to say?
I don't think so. I think just the last thing probably just is I just kind of my goal and my hope with all this stuff that I talk about wasps and various things and also the Instagram posts is and the hopeful book in the future is that I want people to see wasps in a different light. I want them to see them not just as stinging things that they hate, but instead as amazing creatures that they are.
Yeah. Well, when you write that book, you better contact us immediately. I want to read it. I want to have you on the show after. Be a cool experience.
For sure.
So there's pressure. People watch this episode now. There's pressure on you to do it. There you go.
All right. Sounds good.
Thomas, any final questions? You're brimming with questions earlier.
Oh, I'm good. I think I'm good, Jared.
You're good.
Thanks for asking.
You're going to be able to sleep tonight knowing about the parasitoid wasps.
I will not lose a wink.
There you go. Anyway, Sloan, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for being here today. And to everyone who watched or listened, thanks for being here, and take it handy. Top of the morning, lads and ladies. Support for the Awfully Irish podcast is now brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels, and you're no longer need the look of the Irish with the ladies. Manscaped just launched in Ireland. We've gone years without using the right tools for the job. You can now be one of the first men in Ireland to experience their life-changing products.
Your balls will thank you.
Get 20% off and free shipping with the code IrishPod at manscaped.com.
That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code IrishPod.